Hey, Greg Alderman here. Welcome to One Voice Board. Today we're going to talk about Principle 9 of the Principles of Governance, the function of the senior pastor. And of course, if you're in a nonprofit, the function of the executive director. All right, let's get into it. I want to start with a question, as I usually do, and have you think about it, whether you're by yourself or with a group. And that question is this: what is the job description of your senior pastor or executive director? Now, you probably have already picked up that this is a little bit of a trick question, kind of. And the reason I'm going at it by thinking about the job description is because most of the time when we think about the role of the senior pastor or the executive director, we're thinking about the tasks that they perform out front for everyone to see. But what I want you to think about today is the role of the senior pastor or executive director in relationship to the board. What is their role? What is their job description when it comes to leading the board? And there's four things I want to highlight for you today. The first one is this: the senior pastor, executive director, works with the board, whether they're a member of the board or ex officio. They work with the board in developing, implementing, and achieving the goals. Think about these three parts. That's number one on the job description: developing, implementing, and achieving the goals. Now, in the development of the goals, one of the mistakes I think a lot of organizations make is they send one or two people up to the mountaintop to develop the goals and then come down the mountain with the tablets, so to speak, and to share with everyone the vision. But when you read the New Testament, one of the things that's very evident is that the elders gather, the board members gather, and they discern together the leading of the Spirit. I think that's more of a picture of where we're at in leading our organizations. So the senior pastor is responsible for leading the board to primarily focus on its goals. And that means developing goals. Then, when you think about achieving or implementing and achieving those goals, that's the role of the senior pastor on behalf of the board. So the first and most important part of the job description is develop, implement, and achieve the goals. Let me talk a little bit about implement for a moment. When I say implement, that means what we've talked about before in developing the structure, developing the organization so that goals are being achieved by the work of the staff. Everything needs to be aligned towards the achievement of the goals. And in order to achieve the goals, you need to implement a process in order for those goals to be achieved. So think about the role of your chief executive, your senior pastor. The number one responsibility they have to the board is to work with the board in developing a goal, then to develop a structure to implement those goals, and then to work on behalf of the board in achieving those goals. That's number one. The second part of the job description is to connect the jobs of each of the staff in implementing those goals to vision. What do we mean by that? Every job, every committee, every group that works on behalf of the board needs to be focused on how together we are achieving the vision of the church or the organization, and especially achieving that vision by working towards the same goals. If you're in an unhealthy organization or an organization that's just kind of existing, you probably have a lot of groups and a lot of staff that are working in a lot of different ways. They might be doing some really good work, but you have to ask yourself the question: are they working together? And is every group in the church, every staff member in the church or the organization connected to developing the vision and achieving the vision together? That's the job of the senior pastor on behalf, or the chief executive on behalf of the board. The third thing is to establish a biblical culture. I want you to think back to the boundary principles. One of the things that the senior pastor and the chief executive have to do is they have to maintain on behalf of the board the highest standards, morally, ethically, legally, and biblically. And that means establishing a culture not only to achieve the goals, but also to behave in a way that the board expects. As a Christian organization, that means living out the one another's in Scripture. Depending on how you measure the one another's, there's more than 30 of them in the New Testament. They're great guides to how we work and live together and how we establish a culture. And the fourth thing then is to set the example. When I was in the military, one of the things that impressed me the most was the leadership principles that I learned as I was being trained. And one of the things that made the most sense to me is the leadership principles set the example. If your leaders aren't out in front living out what they say they want you to be and what they want you to do, you're not going to be inspired to do it yourself. The best leaders show what it looks like to live out what they're teaching and what they're encouraging you to. Hey, if you want to talk more about what I'm talking about with Principle 9, or you want to learn more about how One Voice Board can come alongside you and help your ministry or help your organization, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at greg@onevoiceboard.org.